Tell me what you think this pitch from Paul Skeens is. Probably some kind of fastball, right? Seems like it has some velocity, a bit of arm side run. Now let's try another one, same perspective, tell me what this pitch is. This one kind of feels like a breaking ball, in this case it's a backdoor sweeper. I think most baseball fans would get those two correct. Now let's change up the perspective a bit and make it look like you're more in the box looking out at Paul Skeens. And I'm going to add a pause right here. What pitch do you think this is, and also where's it going to end up in the strike zone? This is a much tougher task. Now let's try another shape from that perspective. Still difficult, but relative to the other pitch you just saw, you could probably tell that this one had a higher probability of landing closer to your body, even if you couldn't distinguish exactly what pitch type it was. Now I'm going to play those two clips back at full speed. Here's the first one, which was a changeup away for a ball, and here's the second one, which was a four-seam fastball directly at the top of the strike zone. So what does a hitter see? Or put another way, what did you see when you were watching those videos of Paul Skeens? This is a very deep and multi-layered question that, after some recent conversations with individuals in the league, I am determined to find some answers to. The reason I paused those Skeens pitches at about 13 frames after the release of the ball is that I was trying to approximate the decision point of where a hitter has to start their swing. This occurs just past 50% of ball flight, or the point that I paused in the videos I showed. Things after that point aren't useless, but they're likely more additive within the process of swinging rather than informing the decision to swing or not to swing. So our focus should be on the things prior to that decision point. This brings us to the most basic way this topic is talked about among hitters, seeing spin. Go back to Eno Sarris's great piece from 2016, and the answer here is a resounding yes. Hitters see spin. Some hitters mention seeing more red or white on the ball based on how the seams were moving, but I would say this is still spin. Joe Panik, Brandon Belt, a number of other hitters relate some version of yes. But I have a counter to the answer of yes, hitters see spin that I bring up a lot. If hitters can see spin, then why can't anybody hit splitters? That's the pitch that's spinning on average 1,000 rotations less than any fastball, and yet it generates the most chase width and a lower barrel rate than any other pitch. Some splitters are even rotating 2,000 rotations per minute less than fastballs, and still they dominate. This starts to crack open the black box of this issue and where all the nuance comes from. Hitters have incredible vision, as detailed in the 2013 book The Sports Gene by David Epstein. Epstein goes on to cite that baseball players on average have 20/10 vision, so they see things that are 20 feet away as if they're 10 feet away to the average person. I'm not denying that some hitters can see the spin of the ball in that first 20 to 30 feet of flight. My contention, based off conversations with people far smarter than me, is that when hitters say this, they're simplifying everything their brain is doing into a singular word that is taken too literally by the public. So let's backtrack slightly from the decision point in ball flight to this point, the pitcher's release. The best answer I've gotten multiple times to my question of why can't anybody hit a splitter if hitters can see spin is that when a splitter is thrown, the hand of the pitcher is generally directly behind the ball, as if it's a fastball. So it kind of looks like a fastball more than other pitches. So maybe the answer to our question is at the point of release. There was a 2024 study out of Japan from 9 researchers that found MLB pitchers have significantly tighter release variability between their shapes compared to minor league pitchers. The ability to make these pitches come from the same release point is a skill that it kind of seems like is a prerequisite to being a major league pitcher. But it's important to note that even major league pitchers show variance between release points. The average four-seam fastball thrown by a major league right-handed pitcher is released almost 4 inches higher and 4 inches closer to the body than the average sweeper. And yet, stuff models that predict pitch performance off the success of prior similar shapes in the sport's history still love these big sweeping shapes that are often released from a different point than a pitcher's fastball. So you have this push and pull of wanting to match release point, but also wanting to have good stuff. And elements within each of those have inverse relationships. The root of this release point variance is kind of inevitable, given that pitches are released with different hand positions. Take a look at Seth Hernandez, one of the top pitching prospects in all of baseball back in high school. I'm going to play you 3 different pitches at what I think is close to full speed, and I'm going to give you superhuman vision here, really zooming up on Seth. Ready? Here's the first one. Here's the second one, and here's the third one. Let's do it one more time. First one, second one, third one. Now this would be a lot easier if I just froze at the point of release so you could see clearly his hand position and quickly tell that the first pitch he was behind. So it was a fastball, he was on the side of the second one, his slider, and he was on the inside of the third one, which is his changeup. So are hitters actually seeing hand position alongside a difference in release to help inform their swing decision? As you're starting to see, it's very hard to separate one element from another here, and it's probably even harder to get a hitter to exactly tell you what they think they see at release, given this idea that Eno brings up in his 2016 piece of blackout. A lot of hitters don't want to think about what they are seeing at the release point, but I do think there's another element at this point of release that's very important in informing a swing decision. It has to do with release angles. This heavily informs location of a pitch at the plate, which in terms of what hitters are seeing is almost inseparable from everything else. Think of this as the literal angle of the ball out of hand. There's an average for each given pitch type, but this number changes pitch to pitch based on where the pitch is going. The best way to illustrate vertical release angle is by thinking about the pop of a curveball out of hand. This has a positive release angle, literally the only pitch to average that, meaning the pitch literally goes up out of hand before coming down, while all other shapes on average start down or have negative vertical release angles. If that's confusing, remember the beginning of this video when we moved to this pitcher view of Skeens? I asked you to ID the pitch type and see if you could tell me where it was going to end up in the zone. That second part was me asking you to pick up the horizontal release angle or trajectory of these two pitches, which once you were given a comparison between the two shapes, you could probably tell that yes, the second pitch was going to end up closer to me because of the angle it came out of Skeens' hand. There's a tweet from Max Bay, who now works for the Dodgers, that I've had a number of sources bring up unprompted, and it's about this idea of release trajectory or release angles. Bay found that 1 degree of variance in the horizontal angle of release can create variance at the plate somewhere around 17 inches. Yeah, a plate is 17 inches. So when you hear somebody say something like just throw strikes, you can translate it to do something that is nearly impossible. Pitch to the corners, yeah, it sounds fun, but when you're doing that, you're cutting that 1 degree of variance down to 0.5 degrees. I'll go back to my bird's eye view to show what 1 degree of horizontal variance looks like out of the hand. Yeah, that's not a lot. How about 0.5 degrees pitching to the corners? Good luck. I hear this all the time that kids should learn to throw strikes before they learn to throw hard. And to me, that's simplifying an incredibly difficult task for anybody to do when they're rotating near max speeds. It's why the average miss distance in baseball based on intended targets is almost a foot. And it's also incredibly important for a hitter to understand this angle to inform where they're going to swing and whether they're going to swing at all. So we can dissect this concept of what hitters see into a couple different categories. The first one being the literal spin out of hand, which, after thinking about everything else, I don't think is nearly as important as the other elements, two of which that I kind of combined together were release point and hand position, which, when you control for major league pitchers, I don't think has as much impact as you would initially think. And then we have the third one, which we just touched on that I like a lot, which is release trajectories or release angles, which are very much informing location. To me, that's probably one of the main pillars, but we haven't touched on the elephant in the room, mechanics. There's actually a study from the year 2000 in cricket that tried to determine what was the most important in batter performance between experience, delivery cues, and post-release information. The study found that post-release information essentially didn't matter at all. Yeah, basically saying everything we just talked about in this video doesn't matter. My contention is that maybe the seams of a baseball are distinct enough from cricket for this to not perfectly be applied outside of the cricket world. At the very least, we can add another thing to our ideas of what hitters really see. And I personally think mechanical cues, alongside this idea of release angles, carry the largest weight. What we're talking about with mechanics is that hitters have created mental maps of hundreds of thousands of pitches they've seen in their lives from hundreds of thousands of pitchers, such that in any given pitcher they see, they're able to pick up on subtle cues to help inform their swing decision, whether that is arm speed or torso position, or the layback of the arm, or a combination of numerous things. I'm not entirely sure. A key part of mechanical cues, however, is thinking about something very important and directly related to the main question within this video that I haven't brought up yet. What are hitters actually looking at? This question alone can warrant an entire video separate from the concept of what we think they're seeing, but for the purposes of this video, I'll try to keep things simple. The idea of occlusion is a popular one, and it makes a lot of sense. Look at how this guy hides the ball is a common phrase you'll hear a lot in analysis, but there's no baseline created as to what hiding the ball a lot is relative to hiding the ball a little. A while back, Driveline put together an occlusion score for pitchers internally in their systems. It was answering the question, for what percent of a pitcher's delivery can you see the ball? Consider the batter's handedness and his perspective of looking at the pitcher, and you could see how this score would change. Kind of a side note too, but I've been thinking a lot about rubber position this season and how many pitchers have changed their rubber position. And for the most part, I imagine what they're trying to do is A, play with release angles, and B, also play around with hitter perception of their delivery. But back to what we were talking about in terms of occlusion. Zach Greinke was brought up as a pitcher who ended up high on this occlusion, meaning he didn't give hitters a large window to see the ball. I like this line of research a lot. The individual who conducted it, as you saw in that LinkedIn post, now works for the Red Sox organization as well. So perhaps they're doing something that's really cool around it, or perhaps it's something that they haven't pursued because they haven't really found much signal in. It gets at the point that I'm really trying to nail here, though. We're talking about what we think hitters might be looking at, perhaps the ball, but let's try to get into what exactly they're looking at. Yeah, looking at the ball seems like an easy answer, but when you think about how the eyes would have to move through a pitcher's mechanics in order to actually follow the ball all the way through a pitcher's motion, it kind of becomes impossible. One former MLB hitting coach suggested that every hitter is different, but a common pattern is to look proximal to the pitcher's body, think glove or head, with a softer focus, so not fixated on an individual point, but more so looking in a general area during the motion. And then at some point, you kind of jump your eyes to where you expect the elbow or release to be. Now, there's also some idea out there that when you move from what you'd call your fixation point here, you're not immediately taking in all the information that that visual gives you. There's a delay. Move your eyes very quickly from one object to another, and you'll see that it takes a second for your brain to register what you're looking at. Which connects back to our idea that release point info is only so important if you're jumping to that point and hanging there for enough time to process what you're seeing. Driveline Baseball has a pair of very good in-depth pieces on this topic of gaze patterns for hitters, and one of the takeaways that I thought was more tangible was that elite hitters in one study were able to keep their gaze ahead of ball flight slightly, almost anticipating trajectory. Compare this to more amateur hitters who are often behind the ball's trajectory with their gaze. There's also some belief that the head plays a major role in tracking the ball past that decision point, with the idea that the late stage ball movement helps hitters make finite adjustments in where they're swinging to impact the baseball properly. I also had another coach bring up the idea of quiet eye to me, which is this concept of how many fixation points you have when following a pitcher's motion. Some believe that the fewer you have, or the quieter your eye is, can connect to performance if you're fixating in the correct spots. Maybe someday in the very distant future, we'll be able to associate slumps in offensive performance with differences in gaze pattern behavior. Is this 20 to 40 years in the future? Yes, but is it fun to think about? Absolutely. I hope if anything, this video has gotten you to do two things. One, think of a lot more questions, which is always my goal. But number two, think more broadly about what pitchers give off in terms of information and how hitters might use that information to inform their swing decisions. We could probably break this down into some kind of pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, we have two elements. We have mechanics, and then we have release trajectories that are very much informing the location of the pitch. Mechanics, I get it's a little ambiguous. It's just so specific based on the pitcher and the hitter and the hitter's gaze patterns and everything that we kind of touched on at the end of this video. But the most tangible thing that I hope you took away from this is that release angles are very, very important to informing location. And I think that is a huge chunk of what hitters are seeing when they say they see spin. Below that, then we have the actual spin of the baseball, the red-white, the dot concept on sliders. That's often brought up. We have release point stuff, hand position stuff, and anything else I didn't think of that maybe aren't as important as those top two things that we pointed out. Anyways, any questions or anything else, I'll be in the comments. This is a topic that has been kicking around on my sheet of video ideas for a very long time. I'm happy I got to it. It is somewhat incomplete, but I do think it at least broaches the topic in a way that becomes valuable to anybody who has stuck around to this point and is still listening to me ramble. Check out my Substack if you haven't already. Share this channel, subscribe, comment. Appreciate you as always. Hope you're enjoying the 2026 Major League season.